You're listening to the Platform Launchers podcast. I'm John Stange, and it's great to have you with us as always this week as we talk about building and growing and monetizing your online platform. We like to have conversations about taking your passion, turning it into a platform, and letting that become your paycheck. And we have something very important that we need to talk about this week, and that's the idea of quitting. Now, I will say it this way: most people quit too soon, and if you don't want to get the results that most people are getting, don't be like most people. I think people quit far too soon on themselves. They quit far too soon on their dreams. And before you know it, they find themselves with a whole list of regrets that they gave up on. And I don't want that to be you. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you're listening to us right now via the podcast, however you're consuming this content, I want to encourage you to be someone who has some longevity in what you're doing. Now, let me give you some background on how I learned this is a vital task if there's going to be something that you want to build that has some sustainability and some longevity. Many of you know that I wear several vocational hats. I don't recommend this for other people, but somehow this works for me. So in addition to the work that I do here with Platform Launchers and with the online content that I create, many of you know that I'm also a college professor. I teach digital media at Cairn University. I'm also the director of a mission board. It's called the National Mission Board, and we help plant churches and revitalize churches throughout the United States. I'm also an author, and I'm also a pastor. And somehow these roles work well together, but I often get asked how I juggle all these tasks at once. And that's a story for another day. But of these roles, of those things that I just listed, of these hats that I try to wear at the same time, the role that's had the most challenging learning curve for me is my role as a local church pastor. I've been serving in that capacity full time for a little over 25 years. And I say full time, it becomes a lifestyle. It's not really something you ever clock in or clock out. It just becomes your lifestyle. And at this point, I feel very well versed in how to handle that position. But I will tell you that in my early years of pastoral ministry, I frequently felt intimidated. I frequently felt overwhelmed. I frequently felt discouraged. Those were common emotions that I felt during that season of life. And I can tell you, and if I'm just being perfectly honest with the group, more than once I entertained the thought of submitting my resignation. Now, thankfully I didn't, but the thought definitely crossed my mind more than once. And I can still remember one particular moment in the early years of me serving in this role, when I was new to the role. And there were a variety of things going on. The church that I was leading at the time had been declining for at least a decade, possibly a little bit more than that. And it had been declining for that period of time prior to me arriving and attempting to serve. I had only been there a short period of time, and that trend continued. And I remember at the end of my second year there, so at this point now you could say it had been declining for about 12 years, but 2 of those years I was leading. And at the end of my second year, we realized, after looking at some numbers and some details, we realized that our average attendance continued to dip. And I remember looking at that and just thinking, boy, this is so discouraging. And to add a little fuel to that discouragement, one of the women of the church who was a key volunteer made this statement. She said, "Oh, I thought our church was going to grow when we hired you." Can you imagine someone saying, "I thought our church was going to grow when we hired you"? So I can't tell you how much that hurt. That hurt. That was a very difficult thing to hear someone say. I honestly, I remember in that moment, I felt like a failure. I was starting to wonder if I was letting everyone down. Maybe people had unrealistic expectations for me or my leadership. I'm not sure, but I remember at that point, just I felt like a failure. I felt like I was letting everyone down. I'd been serving at that church for 2 years, and the pattern of decline that I inherited, it just continued to go south. It wasn't improving. It kept getting worse. But thankfully, it was about to change. And during the third year, the new culture that I was trying to create in that church, it actually started to take hold. And the ministries we began in year one, they actually started gaining some steam. And and we started to notice that they were gaining some genuine momentum. There was some momentum in the church at this point. New people started attending. Several people that had a history of creating conflict in the church, a long-term history, they started leaving, which was a plus as far as the overall culture of the church was concerned. And at the end of that year, at the end of year 3, we looked at some numbers, we looked at some details, we looked at who was attending, and we learned that during year 3, not only had the decline stopped, but the church had grown by 10%. And I remember in that moment being so grateful to God for his blessing. And I also at that point, I learned a principle that has honestly served me well in just about everything I've ever set my mind to work on ever since. I'm convinced. Now, please keep this timeline in mind. Whatever you're building, whatever platform you're building or online business or whatever it looks like, I'm convinced that it typically takes 3 years of uninterrupted and consistent work to begin seeing the major fruit of ongoing momentum. Now, I don't know if that number encourages you or discourages you, but that's an honest number. Now, you will see success along the way if you're being consistent, incremental success. But I think that after 3 years of uninterrupted, consistent work, that's when you're most likely going to start seeing momentum take a big leap forward. Not a small leap, but a bigger, a monumental leap, if I could say it that way. But in my experience, I've also noticed something else. Most people never get to see or experience that kind of momentum. That's a very sad statement to make, right? Most people never get to see it. Why? Why don't they get to see that? Why do most people not actually experience that kind of momentum in their business, in their ministry, in their projects, in their dreams? Why don't they get to see it? Well, I think there's 3 reasons for it. And I think the 3 reasons are these. First of all, I don't think they're focused. So that's reason number 1. They are not focused. We're going to talk about focus in just a second. Reason number 2, they aren't consistent. And then reason number 3, they quit too soon. They aren't focused, they aren't consistent, and they quit too soon. Let's break those down really quickly. Let's talk about focus for a second here. So if you're an entrepreneur, I'm guessing that you've probably got a lot of ideas floating around in your head. And every entrepreneur I meet seems to have no shortage of ideas floating around in their mind. And I'm guessing if you're an entrepreneur, you excel at coming up with all kinds of new projects and fresh ideas and maybe some concepts that you like to test. And so that's a wonderful thing. That's certainly a good thing. And if you know, that's not uncommon for the entrepreneurial mind. And that's something that should be celebrated, but there also needs to be another piece to that. I think it's all well and good, but if you aren't focused on your primary objective, you can end up becoming a very distracted entrepreneur who doesn't stick with a single idea long enough to see if it might really work. And so that's why I'm saying that one of the key components to experiencing long-term success is focus. You need to be focused. You have to find the thing that you're going to spend an abnormal amount of time addressing or investing yourself in or building. So that's focus. But let's talk about consistency as well. What does your weekly routine look like? So as I'm talking about consistency, as I'm bringing up that subject, I'm just asking the question, what does your weekly routine look like? I remember when I was in college, getting to a spot where I realized I had my schedule so planned out that I could tell you what I was doing at any hour of the day or any hour of the week. So you could ask me a question like, what are you going to be doing on this day of the month? I'd figure out what day of the week it was, and I could tell you basically an hour by hour breakdown of what I was going to be doing because I had it planned out. It was really the only way that I could get everything completed that I needed to complete for my studies. So from an entrepreneurial standpoint, if I asked you right now, what will you be doing next Tuesday afternoon at 1 p.m.? Or if you have a traditional job and you'd be at your traditional job, then that's fine. What will you be doing next Tuesday at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. or 9 p.m.? Would you be able to answer that? Is the answer just sitting around dreaming? Or will you actually be doing something? Or how about if I ask this? I could get real specific, especially if you're a content creator on the internet. If I asked you, how long has it been since you've released a blog post or a podcast or a YouTube video? Has it been more than a week ago? These are questions that I think are useful for us to ask when we're thinking about consistency. I am convinced that consistency is the secret sauce that flavors the success of most of the high achievers in your friend group. So when you think about your friend group, you think about the people you associate with, there's probably a few people in that friend group that you would say, yeah, that person is a high achiever. She's a high achiever. He's a high achiever. There's probably somebody or maybe several people in that friend group, in your circle of friendship, your circle of influence, that you would say, yeah, that person's a high achiever. Well, I'm convinced that if you dial down into what's going on in their day-to-day life, consistency is the secret sauce that's flavoring the success of that high achiever. And what they're doing, if you look at what they're doing and how they schedule their week, they're creating deadlines. You would say maybe they're artificial deadlines, but regardless, they're creating deadlines and then they're meeting those deadlines. They're saying, by this time, I will do this thing. And then they do that thing. They don't make excuses for failing to show up. That's not in their vocabulary. They don't do that. They don't make excuses for failing to show up. There is no such thing in their vocabulary as too busy or too tired. They plan things out. They find a way to get things done no matter what. And I'll guarantee that most of the people you admire possess the trait of consistency. If you look back at the lives of successful leaders or entertainers or entrepreneurs or even members of your own family tree, the people that you look up to, you will see that the trait of consistency is exemplified in the lives of those who rose to the top. I have a habit of watching these short videos on historical leaders. And right now I've been watching videos on the Egyptian and the Assyrian empires from right around 1500 BC. I know that sounds boring, but I like history and I love studying leadership. And again, I even see this as a consistent thread in the lives of historical leaders. People that remain consistent get things done. It is the secret sauce that's flavoring their success. But then there's one other piece that I mentioned earlier, and it's this idea of not quitting. Don't quit. So I've already confessed this to you, but again, a couple years into serving as a local church pastor, I truly was discouraged enough that I was on the verge of giving up. And I've gone through seasons like that throughout the past 25 years. Sometimes I feel highly encouraged, and then sometimes I'll go through a short span where I feel a little discouraged. And it's very easy to entertain thoughts of giving up when you have moments like that. And I remember a couple years into serving as a pastor, I was a young guy and I was on the verge of giving up. But there was something inside of me that wouldn't let me do it. I would think about it, but then I was like, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. And I have to say, hindsight, looking back at all of this, thankfully, I hung on long enough to see the fruit of the seeds that had been planted all along the way. Now, tying that back to our platforms and our businesses, if you're in the process right now, as you're listening to my voice or watching us via video, if you're in the process of building an online platform or podcast or blog or email list or membership community. Some of us in the Platform Launchers membership community are building all of these things or some part of them. If you're in the process of building a YouTube channel or a book empire, or really anything else, don't give up prematurely. Don't give up prematurely. When you're building something with lasting value, it's going to need a solid foundation. And a solid foundation, that requires time to build. But once it's in place, the rest of the building comes together faster than might have seemed possible at first. I think I quoted this guy a few weeks ago, and I'm going to quote him again right now. If you haven't heard of the name Alex Hormozi, I think, or Hormozi, I guess is how he says it. He's worth checking out. He's written some. He posts a lot of content on what was called Twitter. Now it's called X. I'm going to have to get used to calling it X. But not long ago, I came across this quote from Alex Hormozi, Hormozi. That's how he spells it. And he was speaking about success as a podcaster, but I think his example could be easily applied to other spheres of online platform creation. But this is what he said. He said, to be a top 1% podcaster, you have to upload 21 podcasts. Now, I do a lot of podcasting, so that statement got my interest. So I followed up to see what he meant. And he went on to say 90% don't go past 1, 9% don't go past 20. Only 1% of podcasters ever make it beyond a 21st episode. And then he said, so when people say try harder, it usually just means don't give up. Don't give up. So that's my encouragement to you today as well. Get focused, stay consistent, and don't quit. Don't give up. The successful people you admire, they are following this path. And if you're not on this path with them, start identifying what might be keeping you from joining them. Is it because you're distracted? That's entirely possible. Entrepreneurs, we like to dabble into many things. So maybe you have to limit some of the distractions, right? Maybe there's too many things that have got your attention right now. Limit some of those distractions. Or maybe you're going through a season right now, and I've gone through seasons like this, but maybe you're going through a season where you're discouraged. That's certainly understandable. We all go through seasons like that. Sometimes all it takes is some physical activity of walking or exercising or something like that to kind of shake us out of a fog. So let me encourage you to incorporate that. Be around people who inspire you. Do something to interrupt that pattern of discouragement. But if you're not finding yourself completing projects, if you're finding yourself quitting too soon, it may be that you're going through a temporary season of discouragement, and those are possible to interrupt. It's possible to get out of those temporary seasons. Maybe the problem isn't either of those. Maybe the problem you're dealing with is just something in the category of a lack of discipline. So if that's what it is, just identify it for what it is, and some friendly accountability with some others that believe in you and believe in the things that you're doing. That can certainly help when it comes to areas of discipline. So maybe you're distracted, maybe you're discouraged, maybe you just need some additional discipline, whatever it may be. If you're not on the path that is allowing you to be focused and consistent and not quit, take a look at these things, see if one of those might be something you need to interrupt. Just figure out whatever it is so you can address it, because that's exactly what the people you admire are doing. Don't be someone who gives up too quickly. Stay focused, remain consistent, don't quit too soon. It usually takes till that third year before you start seeing the kind of momentum that assures your heart that what you're building has some longevity. So build a solid foundation, but stick with it long enough for you to experience that win. Now, before we finish up, I just want to remind you of a couple quick things that you could see if you visit platformlaunchers.com. If you head over to platformlaunchers.com, you'll see two things right away. First of all, we love to encourage visitors to take a 14-day test drive of our membership community, because in our membership community, you'll get access to hundreds of hours of video training. We have courses, we have content, we have all sorts of useful things on just about every topic you could think of related to online platform development. It's a vast library at this point, and that's accessible to you immediately if you take a 14-day free test drive of our membership community. You'll also get live training with me and our group each week, and you get to meet just an exciting and inspiring group of people inside our members club where we get things done. We were just talking about our wins and our goals right before we went live here with the podcast, and I have to tell you, lots of inspiring and encouraging things happening in the members club here at Platform Launchers. So if you want to get on board and join us and be part of that, just stop at platformlaunchers.com and take that free 14-day test drive of our members club. And also, you'll notice right on the homepage of Platform Launchers, you'll see a 21-day platform development planning guide that you can download for free. It'll help you get focused and synthesize your idea and put some things down on paper that can actually help you get things done related to your platform. It'll show you how to really incorporate what we call the 5 Ds of online platform development into what you're doing. Will help you discover your message, will help you figure out how best to deliver your content, will teach you how to develop your tribe and then deploy your team and then derive your income from all this content that you're producing and this platform that you're building. So that 21-day platform development planning guide, it's free at platformlaunchers.com, and I hope you'll take advantage of it. And I hope it's super helpful for you with what you're building. But that's it for us this week. Thanks again for tuning in. It's always so fun to be able to spend a little time with you each week, and we're grateful for it. And we look forward to catching up with you again right here next week. Take care.